Hi everyone, Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch President here with our special weekly update for you on social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. Thanks for joining us this special Christmas week. First things first, Merry Christmas to all of you from all of us here at Judicial Watch. We get a gift every day from the American people in terms of support, and we're really grateful for it. And I just hope that you and your family have a wonderful Christmas holiday and a wonderful New Year. Here at Judicial Watch, we were busy this week. Of course, Congress was here in session this week passing tax cuts. I don't know if they've been signed into law or not, but we focused on the anti-corruption work. So corruption never takes a holiday, unfortunately, here in Washington, D.C., but you can trust that Judicial Watch is on the case. A lot of corruption to be uncovered as it relates to the anti-Trump actions by the FBI, Justice Department, and Mueller operation. We got some big news on a major case that we've been battling with the Antifa violent left movement out in California. And also we filed an amicus brief in a case involving secrecy for the Obama IRS corruption. And so obviously we oppose that secrecy, so I'll tell you about that. But first up is the ongoing, really, revelations and developments about the efforts to take down President Trump. Now, there's nothing wrong with opposing President Trump because you don't like his politics and you think he needs to be removed from office because he did something wrong. You know, it's a free country. But you can't break the rules to get the results you want there. And in this case, it looks like this is what's been happening with the Mueller operation and with the Obama Justice Department, FBI, and frankly, it continued even into the Trump administration with the deep staters. We've had now revelation after revelation of improper bias, both in the FBI, Justice Department, and the Mueller operation, targeting President Trump and evidently protecting Hillary Clinton. We've got Peter Strzok, the FBI special agent, who was sending these anti-Trump texts where he talked about having an insurance policy in case President Trump won. He was the top agent at the FBI, one of the two top agents of the FBI on counterintelligence matters, was running the Clinton email investigation, and then was the go-to guy on the Trump-Russia collusion investigation. And then we have also the Andrew Weissman, who is the #2 Mueller deputy, who Judicial Watch exposed as having an anti-Trump bias. He was sending an email, for instance, we found, to Sally Yates, the acting Attorney General under President Trump. She was an Obama holdover, and she was there for 2.5 weeks in the beginning of the year. She was fired by Trump after she refused to defend his travel ban in court. Complete lawlessness on her part, unethical. And what happens? Weissman, who's a top Justice Department official himself, sends her an email saying, "I'm in awe of you." So this guy gets to be hired as #2 at the Mueller operation. And on top of that, the Wall Street Journal then reports he goes to the election night party of Hillary Clinton. So we have a partisan activist. It's one thing to be a Democrat or be a liberal and have views different from the president. Frankly, you can be a Republican and have views different than the president. It's another thing to be an activist, a partisan activist against the president and someone who supports lawlessness against the president, and be picked by a special counsel who's supposed to be reassuring the public that his investigation is free of bias. Heck, that's why we have the special counsel appointed to begin with. And this FBI special agent, Peter Strzok, who I was telling you about, he was removed from the Mueller investigation because of this bias 4 months ago. But it was covered up by Mr. Mueller because they didn't want this information out there and they didn't want to be criticized for having someone like him on it. So there's this crisis in confidence, not only in the way the Justice Department's been operating, but the way the FBI's been operating and the way Mueller's operation's been operating. And of course, to top it all off, you've got Andrew McCabe, who's also implicated in these text messages. He's the #2 official at the Justice Department. The Judicial Watch is exposed as having conflicts of interest that he didn't act on as he should have in a timely way. What were the conflicts of interest? His wife had taken over $500,000 from Terry McAuliffe, the Clinton crony who was governor of Virginia, in her campaign for office in Virginia. She was running it at the state level. And McCabe didn't recuse himself from any of the Clinton investigations until a week before the election. That's what the documents show that Judicial Watch uncovered. Not the media, not Congress, but Judicial Watch uncovered. Comey was in on it too, the former FBI director. Now McCabe is number 2 at the FBI still. And he's also been implicated in these text messages I've been talking about. He was up on the Hill this week, supposedly, testifying for hours on end about the dossier that the FBI has been using. And I guess he was, according to the FBI, the Fox News report, defending the dossier without actually being able to defend any specific fact in it, other than the fact that one individual traveled to Russia who was associated with President Trump's campaign on a separate issue. So here we've got pro-Clinton. By the way, McCabe recused himself on the Clinton issues just the week before the election. I don't know if I told you that or not. So you've got his involvement, you've got this FBI special agent's involvement in the Clinton email investigation. And the one thing that McCabe did talk about, supposedly at this hearing, which was behind closed doors, which is another problem. Congress is investigating a lot of these key issues behind closed doors. I don't know what the purpose of that is that the FBI, it was clear last year, was defending or pursuing this dossier quite aggressively. Now compare and contrast what they were doing with Hillary Clinton's Russia collusion information. Now this dossier, of course, was created by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee, who used the law firm Cutout to pay for it. And the dossier is created by the authors going allegedly to Russia to talk to intel people there. So Hillary Clinton's campaign pays someone to go to Russia to communicate with Russian intelligence about her political opponent. And who gets targeted for a collusion investigation? Donald Trump. So by all accounts, Hillary Clinton should be subject to a special counsel for her Russia collusion. And of course, Judicial Watch exposed how she was getting money directly from the Russians through her husband's speaking fees on this Uranium One matter. So a lot of developments this week. At least Congress is beginning to ask the questions of some of the right people, like Andrew McCabe. Of course, Andrew McCabe, FBI has been stonewalling, bringing him in to testify. You have this Justice Department official, Bruce Orr, whose wife worked for this Clinton campaign vendor. And he's meeting with this Fusion GPS dossier creators while he's at Justice Department. He just got demoted once that came out. He was up on the Hill testifying, but of course we don't have the information because we can't get it, because it was behind closed doors. So what Judicial Watch does is we sue for information. So we sued for the dossier. We sued for payments around the dossier, to be more specific. Did the Justice Department FBI pay the authors of the dossier? How did that work? What were the communications? Bruce Orr's communications, that's covered by this FOIA request and lawsuit. See, unlike what everyone else is doing when they talk about this stuff, actually Judicial Watch is in court fighting for the information. And we're being stonewalled by the Justice Department and the FBI and the dossier, who refuse to confirm whether or not the dossier exists. And it's not just on the dossier that we're getting the stonewalling, but virtually every key issue related to the Russia scandal is being stonewalled by the agencies responsible for the documents. For instance, the unmaskings. Let's take a step back. Remember, Susan Rice first denied there were unmaskings, and then she admitted that she did them. Susan Rice, the Obama National Security Advisor. And supposedly there were hundreds of unmaskings done. Now, what does this mean? It means that our spy agencies were listening in on foreign nationals talking. And when they mentioned or maybe talked to Americans, these Americans sometimes are unmasked for intelligence purposes. And the allegation is, and the concern is, that they were using these unmaskings, or the authority to unmask individuals, Americans, caught up in warrantless eavesdropping because they, quote, needed to know. Well, don't you believe it? I'm convinced, and to me the information tells us, that they were targeting, they realized, oh, we eavesdrop on foreign nationals, let's use that as a backdoor way to spy on the Trump team. General Flynn was caught up in it. Jeff Sessions was caught up in it, excuse me. And I'm convinced the president himself was caught up in it. So they were weaponizing our intelligence agencies to target their political opponents. That's the allegation. So we've asked for documents about the unmaskings. We sued for documents about the unmaskings. And just, I think this week, we get a court brief from this Trump administration. Who is running the Justice Department? Mueller or Sessions? Who's running the FBI? Who's running the NSA? Hillary Clinton or appointees of President Trump? Because they're telling us we can't get anything on the unmaskings. They won't confirm that they're even in existence. They don't want to give us anything. The stone wall is 100 feet high. So this is exceedingly frustrating. So they're stonewalling Congress. They're stonewalling Judicial Watch. Which means they're stonewalling the American people. Because when we get the documents, we make them public. Congress gets the documents, they don't necessarily become public. So I think the one positive development, and I'll tell you why it may not be, is the idea that their Justice Department, there's a report, I think NBC News first broke it, that Jeff Sessions is finally getting around, or the Justice Department is looking at this Uranium One scandal again. Uranium One scandal. The FBI, Justice Department evidently knew the Russians were trying to buy the vote of Hillary Clinton to get approval for the Uranium One takeover. But nothing was done. So supposedly Justice Department prosecutors are talking to the FBI about what evidence they had. Well, how do you think that's going to turn out? I'm hopeful it turns into a special counsel, a constitutional special counsel, as opposed to an out of control special counsel like Robert Mueller is. The last time they did something like this, they did it on the Obama IRS targeting scandal. So you had prosecutors in the Justice Department ask themselves, basically the same ones who were responsible for the cover-up of the Obama IRS scandal and who were implicated in it, whether they should reopen the investigation. Guess what the answer to that was? No. So the Trump Justice Department refused to do anything else on this outrageous targeting scandal by the IRS. So I hope this isn't an indication of what's going to happen with Uranium One and the pay-to-play allegations against Hillary Clinton. But let's take a further step back. The Hillary Clinton email investigation has been irredeemably compromised by this FBI special agent, by the Lynch-Clinton tarmac meetings, by Comey's machinations. It needs to be reopened. They need to have a clean team go in and reopen it. I don't know whether she gets prosecuted in the end or not, but we need an honest investigation. And the Trump-Russia collusion investigation, what a mess that is ethically. That's got to be shut down until we figure out about this corrupt dossier that was laundered into the FBI and Justice Department and evidently still being used by Mueller. His number two is an anti-Trumper. His FBI special agent lead, he had to remove because of evident bias, and then he covered all that up. And then just recently, he goes in through a backdoor method, yes, backdoor, goes and gets the emails of the Trump transition team, evidently without a subpoena, in a way that could be both unlawful and illegal, and unethical. I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough about records requests and how do you get emails to know that what Mueller did to vacuum up all those emails of Trump transition officials without their foreknowledge or giving them the chance to object was a scam. So it is ethical compromise on top of ethical compromise by the Mueller operation. And Rod Rosenstein, who is the number 2 at the Justice Department, who appointed Mr. Mueller, needs to take ownership of this. I mean, you see Director Wray and Rod Rosenstein talk about this IG as being the end-all and be-all. We got to wait for the IG report before we do anything. In the meantime, the Mueller steamroller goes on, and it's someone's got to put a stop to this, at least till we know that there's an ethical investigation going on, as opposed to this out-of-control investigation. So we got more coming, more law. We got these probably 20 lawsuits just on the Russia, Mueller, Obama, spying, unmasking, you name it, we've got it covered. Judicial Watch is in court on this. We're not just talking about it, we're in court. It was a court case that got this email from the Mueller deputy. It's pressure, I'm convinced, from Judicial Watch FOIA requests and lawsuits that is forcing the collection of these texts and the ultimate disclosure of them. We have a lawsuit for Mueller's budget. We have a lawsuit over the unmaskings. We have a lawsuit over the dossier. We have a lawsuit over the targeting of General Flynn. No one else is doing this work. So the Trump administration, I suggest, take a hold of this and say, look, these records need to be declassified. The public has a right to know what its Justice Department and FBI are up to, given these allegations of corruption and politicization of our law enforcement process and our spying, and release the records. So let's hope that's done. So I talked about the IRS case. Let's move on to another topic. So one of the good things is the Trump IRS, the Trump administration, settled lawsuits that were against the IRS and IRS officials over the targeting scandal that I talked about, where the Obama IRS was targeting the Tea Party and its political opponents with suppression by refusing to act on their applications to do business. And by refusing to act and then asking them all sorts of invasive questions that were intimidating, like their donors and what books they read and who goes to their meetings and all sorts of ridiculous questions that they later admitted they didn't need to know, they basically shut down the Tea Party movement in the 2012 election, which helped accidentally, perhaps, but I don't think it was accidental, President Obama win office again. There's more than one way to steal an election. Now, Judicial Watch has been in the lead of getting records about what was really going on at the IRS. We exposed that Lerner and the IRS knew exactly what they were doing. They knew the controversy would cause. They knew they didn't have a right to ask the questions that they were asking, harassing Tea Party groups and perceived opponents of President Obama. I mean, in fact, one of the documents that sticks out is that there was one official who said that because they were getting some blowback from Congress because some of the Tea Party groups were complaining to Congress about the stalling. And one of the officials said, well, maybe I'll send this group another letter asking for information they didn't need to get them to stop complaining to Congress. So they were purposely bothering these groups in order to prevent them from talking to Congress. And we also exposed how Lois Lerner's IRS sent over 1 million pages to the Justice Department and Robert Mueller's FBI on every political group in the country with the idea of prosecuting the very groups that Lois Lerner's IRS was suppressing. So remember that the next time you hear about how mighty and ethical Mr. Mueller is. His IRS, his FBI was working with Lois Lerner's IRS to try to put political opponents of Barack Obama in jail. That's the sum total of it. So anyway, the Justice Department settled these cases that the Tea Party groups had pursued in court. And we weren't representing these Tea Party groups. We were doing our FOIA work. So the cases are largely over, except that Lois Lerner and Holly Paz, who was her top aide and basically one of the top people involved in this issue, they were deposed in these cases, and they don't want their depositions ever to see the light of day. So meaning their testimony we can't find out about. So the two top officials in the IRS, responsible in part for what was going on, they don't want to know it. They don't want any American to know anything they said about this case in this court proceeding. And they say because they've gotten threats in the past, they shouldn't have to have these records come out. Well, I don't want anyone to be threatened. The IRS threatens everyone all the time. I don't want that to happen, and I don't want IRS officials to feel threatened, even if they do the wrong thing. But the fact is there are credible allegations of misconduct by these government officials and the IRS generally under Barack Obama, and the American people have a right to know. And Judicial Watch has multiple lawsuits about IRS records. We're still getting stonewalled. So we filed an amicus brief with the federal court asking that these records be released. You know, in a republic, excuse me, not a Republican, but in a republic, we're a constitutional republic, citizens have a right to know what their government is up to, especially when officials like Lois Lerner and the IRS abuse the powers entrusted to them. And so you've got this unprecedented effort to seal this testimony for all time. So hopefully the court puts a stop to that and we get more information about this IRS scandal out to the American people. Because as far as I'm concerned, we still don't know all the answers. And I still think there's a case to be pursued by prosecutors, but we'll see. So in addition to Judicial Watch getting all the records out, we're in court trying to make sure that other records aren't kept secret, like this deposition. It's a lot of work, but you know, we've been talking about tax reform this week, and I guess everyone's excited because most people are going to get tax cuts. I guess some people are going to get tax increases, but pretty much most people are going to get tax cuts, which is all well and good. But I'm interested in tax reform that reforms the IRS and gets the IRS away from our decisions, whether to support groups, to support candidates, to exercise your First Amendment rights. Because of these types of abuses by the Obama IRS, Americans have been intimidated from participating in the political process, supporting charities of their choice, and exercising their First Amendment rights. So the IRS needs to have its wings clipped. You should be able to support whatever group you want without fear of being attacked by the IRS and the federal government. Because that's what was going on during the Obama IRS. They were suppressing the Tea Party groups and they were targeting their donors. And it was all hands on deck during the Obama administration because they got the FBI into it, they got the Justice Department into it, they got the Department of Labor into it, they got the Federal Election Commission into it. It was a widespread scandal, a political targeting scandal. And to bring it all together, an administration that would abuse the IRS, the FBI, and the Justice Department in 2012 to target its political opposition in order to ensure the re-election of the president, do you think they wouldn't do something like that when it came to targeting their political opponents in 2016 during another election season? Of course they would. So that's why the FBI and the Justice Department and the Obama administration don't deserve any leeway, any wiggle room as to what they did last year in targeting President Trump and his team with spying and leaking and things of that nature. So Another important topic is, I've told you this before, if you haven't followed it, you should. We have been monitoring this Antifa movement, this violent left movement across the country. You've seen the riots and the violence associated with this far left movement. And there's a person out in California, in Berkeley, who's a teacher, who's been associated with this movement as a leader. And I think she's under criminal indictment for violent and riot-related acts. She's also a teacher in Berkeley. So we asked for documents about it. Well, you would have straightforward FOIA request. You've got this public figure involved in this, I mean, you see the video of what she was doing out in the streets, a violent person. That's what the video shows. So, and there have been allegations that she was abusing her position as teacher to radicalize her students. So we asked for documents. Well, she and her allies came into court and sued in federal court to prevent us from getting the records, or to try to prevent us from getting the records. So they were attacking Judicial Watch as, you know, calling us all sorts of names in federal court for merely doing what we do best, which is asking questions about what the government's up to. And so the federal court kind of put a hold on the case with a temporary restraining order until, I guess, the court could figure out what was up and what was down. And the good news is that temporary restraining order has been lifted, because this far left group, this Antifa group, I think the official name of it is By Any Means Necessary. Boy, that should tell you something, huh? They didn't want us to be even able to talk to the Berkeley School District about these records. And the court said, no, you can proceed, you can talk to Judicial Watch, you need to look for the records. And whether we get them or not is going to be an open question, because there will be future court proceedings. But this initial attack by Antifa, the violent left, through court proceedings against Judicial Watch, because we're in them now, the initial attack suffered a significant setback, and there was a significant victory by Judicial Watch with the lifting of this temporary restraining order. This is all more of the same. You've got a government official who doesn't want us to find out what they're up to. And now they're going to court to stop us from doing that. So we got a victory, at least initially, just this week. But it shows you what Judicial Watch does. I mean, we're always in court, always trying to defend your right to know and to hold the government to account. And you know, on this Christmas season, I know we always have a lot to be thankful for, and the gifts that we have as we celebrate the birth of our Lord. But we have a gift for living here in the United States. Despite the efforts of the left and government corruption and all of that, there's nowhere else in the world that allows a Judicial Watch to do what we're able to do here. And I'm talking anywhere else. Forget about China or Russia or places like that. Even in the United Kingdom or France or in Canada, they don't have Judicial Watches. They simply don't have the sort of independent group like Judicial Watch, and the law doesn't allow for us, doesn't allow for them to go into court like Judicial Watch does. We're able to go into court and be on even ground. I'm not naive, I realize it's the government versus us, but at least the government's got to answer to us. And oftentimes the government's got to do what we're asking under the law, which is give us the documents or stop doing bad things. So as we celebrate Christmas, you know, let's all celebrate the great gift of being born here in the United States of America. So on that patriotic Christmas note, I wish you adieu, and I'll see you next week here on our weekly update.